There's an old saying that got passed around the teams back in '68. You've probably never heard it because the men who said it don't repeat it anymore. Charlie owns the night, but whatever's in those tunnels don't belong to Charlie either. Now, I want you to sit with that for a second. These were MACV-SOG operators, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, the most classified, most dangerous special operations unit of the entire Vietnam War. Men who crossed into Laos, Cambodia, North Vietnam itself. Men who operated so far behind enemy lines that if they died, the United States government would deny they ever existed. These were not men who scared easily. So when I tell you that something happened in the tunnels of Cu Chi in the winter of 1969 that made hardened killers refuse to go back underground, when I tell you that 3 separate veterans from that era have shared variations of the same story without ever meeting each other, when I tell you that, the after-action reports from this mission were classified, and then, according to one former intelligence officer, simply vanished from the archives, you need to understand that I'm not here to tell you a ghost story. I'm here to tell you what happened. What those men found, and why, 55 years later, they still wake up at 100 hours, drenched in sweat, reaching for a weapon that isn't there. If you think you know everything about the Vietnam War, keep watching. You don't know this. Let me take you back. December 1969, Republic of Vietnam, about 40 clicks northwest of Saigon, in the Cu Chi district of what was then Hay U in Gia province. If you've done any reading on Vietnam, you've probably heard of the Cu Chi tunnels, 250 kilometers of underground passages. Some sections went down 3-4 levels deep. Hospitals down there, command centers, weapons caches, living quarters for entire NV battalions. The tunnel system had been under construction since the French occupation in the 1940s. By the time American forces arrived, Charlie had turned the entire region into a subterranean fortress. You could be standing right on top of the enemy and never know it. The U.S. military solution was the tunnel rats. Small-statured soldiers, usually volunteers, who would crawl down into those holes with nothing but a pistol, a flashlight, and a whole lot of faith. This happened to a recon team from Command and Control South, a subdivision of MACV-SOG based out of Ban Mi Thuo. The team designation was RT Sidewinder, 6 Americans, including the 1-0 team leader and 3 Montagnard indigenous troops. The 1-0 was a staff sergeant named Danny Kowalczyk, 24 years old, Chicago native. On his 3rd tour, 2nd with SOG, his 1-1 was a specialist named Marcus Webb, a black kid from Philadelphia who'd been in country for 8 months and already had a reputation for keeping his cool when everything went sideways. The 1-2 was a new guy, a sergeant named Timothy Ellers, call sign Preacher, because he'd been studying for seminary before he got drafted. You need to remember these names: Kowalczyk, Webb, Ellers, because what happened to RT Sidewinder didn't happen to statistics, it happened to them. The mission brief came down on December 3rd. Intelligence had identified a previously unmapped tunnel entrance approximately 6 kilometers inside the Hobo Woods, north of the primary Cu Chi complex. SIGINT Signals intelligence suggested the tunnel connected to a deeper network that the NVA was using as a staging area for the upcoming dry season offensive. RT Sidewinder's job was simple: insert via helicopter at last light, move to the objective, locate the entrance, conduct initial reconnaissance of the tunnel system, mark positions for follow-on forces, extract at dawn. Simple on paper. Nothing in Vietnam was ever simple. They inserted without incident. The LZ was cold. No enemy contact during the movement to the objective. Webb was walking point, Kowalczyk running the middle of the file, Preacher pulling rear security with 2 of the yards. They found the tunnel entrance exactly where intelligence said it would be, concealed beneath a termite mound in a bamboo thicket, classic BC construction. The entrance was barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through on his belly. Here's where things get strange. Webb was the first to notice it. As they set up security around the entrance, he called Kowalczyk over, said something felt off. Now, in the teams, you learn to trust gut feelings. You stayed alive by trusting gut feelings. Kowalczyk noted it, but pressed on with the mission. They had a job to do. The initial descent went according to protocol. Kowalczyk went in first. He was small enough, 5'6", 140, and experienced enough to lead. He carried a suppressed Swedish K submachine gun, a .22 high standard pistol with a suppressor and a red lens flashlight. Standard tunnel kit. The shaft dropped about 10 feet before leveling out into a horizontal passage. packed earth walls. The smell hit him immediately, that particular tunnel smell that veterans describe as mildew mixed with decay, mixed with something else, something older. Webb came down second, then Preacher. Kowalczyk later said that was when he noticed the carvings. This is where I need you to understand something about VC tunnel construction. The tunnels were utilitarian, functional, built for survival, not aesthetics. You didn't waste time carving decorations into walls when American B-52s might collapse the whole thing on your head at any moment. But these walls had carvings. Kowalczyk's flashlight beam swept across symbols he didn't recognize, not Vietnamese characters, not Chinese, not anything he'd seen in 2 years operating in Southeast Asia, angular patterns, geometric shapes that seemed to connect in ways that hurt to look at. Later, when he tried to draw them for the debrief, he said his hand wouldn't move right, like his brain wouldn't let him reproduce them. Webb saw them too. Preacher saw them. 3 witnesses, same account. They pushed deeper, the passage wound through the earth like something alive. Not the typical straight-line VC construction. This twisted, descended at irregular angles. The walls narrowed, then widened, then narrowed again, as if the tunnel itself was breathing. 50 meters in, they hit the first chamber. And that's when they found the bodies. Not American bodies. Not Vietnamese either. Kowalczyk's flashlight illuminated the chamber, and all 3 men stopped moving. There were 7 of them, arranged in a circle on the dirt floor, seated positions cross-legged facing inward. Their skin had mummified in the humidity, pulled tight against skulls, mouths open. They wore what looked like French colonial uniforms. Pieces of them anyway, remnants, scraps that might have been 50 years old. The French had been driven out in 1954, 15 years before RT Sidewinder descended into that hole. These bodies looked much, much older than 15 years. Here's what made Webb's blood go cold, though. He told this to the debrief officer, and he told it again 30 years later in a hospital interview. The bodies were arranged around something, a hole, another shaft going straight down into the dark in the center of their circle, and one of the bodies was pointing at it, arm extended, skeletal finger aimed directly at the opening. As if in its final moment, whatever killed this person, it wanted to show anyone who came after exactly where the danger was. Kowalczyk made the call to keep going. He would spend the rest of his life questioning that decision. The second shaft went down another 15 feet, deeper than any tunnel any of them had ever encountered. The air changed, colder, wetter, the smell intensified, but underneath the decay was something else now, something metallic, copper, like blood but not quite. Preacher was praying under his breath, not for show, not for comfort. The man was genuinely afraid, and Preacher had watched 2 of his teammates die in an ambush outside Khartoum 4 months earlier without flinching. The lower passage opened into a larger space. Kowalczyk's light couldn't reach the walls. The ceiling disappeared into blackness above them. The floor was smooth, unnaturally smooth, like it had been polished over centuries. That's when they heard the breathing. Multiple, surrounding them, coming from the darkness beyond the reach of their lights. Webb raised his weapon. Kowalczyk swept his flashlight in a full arc. Nothing, the breathing continued. Slow, rhythmic, coordinated, like whatever was making it was doing so in unison. And then it stopped. All at once. Perfect silence. Kowalczyk gave the signal to withdraw. Whatever this was, it exceeded their mission parameters. They were recon, not a full assault element. They would mark the location, call in the coordinates, let someone else figure out what they found. They began moving back toward the shaft. That's when Preacher screamed. Webb spun around. His light caught Preacher's face, eyes wide, mouth open, weapon dropped in the dirt. Preacher was looking at something behind Webb, something that Webb couldn't see, something that, based on Preacher's expression, he didn't want to see, but he had to look. He turned. Later, Marcus Webb would spend 4 years trying to describe what he saw to therapists, to priests, to fellow veterans who understood that Vietnam broke men in ways that couldn't be fixed. He never found the words. What he said was this. It looked like a man who'd been stretched, like someone took a person and pulled them apart and then put them back together wrong. Too many joints, arms that bent in places arms don't bend, and the face, he always stopped there. By the time he turned, whatever it was had retreated into the darkness. But he heard it move. He said it sounded like wet fabric being dragged across stone, like something heavy and boneless sliding away into the deeper tunnels. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed Preacher, shoved Webb toward the shaft, and they climbed, faster than they should have, training abandoned, pure survival instinct taking over. They scraped through passages that seemed tighter than before, narrower than they remembered, as if the tunnel itself was closing around them. They burst out of the entrance gasping. The yards were waiting, professional, alert. They'd heard nothing from above, no sounds, no disturbance. They asked what had happened. None of the Americans could answer. Here's what the historical record tells us. The Hobo Woods had been a major operational area since the early 1960s. French forces had fought in that region during the First Indochina War. Before them, the Japanese occupation had used forced labor to construct fortifications. Before even that, the area held religious significance to local populations going back centuries. Temples had stood there, sacred sites that predated Buddhism's arrival in Vietnam. In 1953, a French patrol of 15 legionnaires entered the Hobo Woods pursuing Viet Minh guerrillas. They were never seen again. Their bodies were never recovered. The French command attributed the loss to enemy action and didn't investigate further. In 1962, an Arvon Army of the Republic of Vietnam reconnaissance platoon reported finding a tunnel entrance matching the description of the one RT Sidewinder would discover 7 years later. They sent 3 soldiers to investigate. One returned. He was found wandering in a rice paddy 2 kilometers away, completely mute. He never spoke again. He died in a Saigon psychiatric facility in 1971, and in 1967, 2 years before Kowalczyk's team descended into that hole, a squad of U.S. Army engineers surveying the tunnel complexes went missing for 18 hours. When they reappeared, they were missing their demolitions equipment, their weapons, and according to unofficial reports, all memory of what had happened to them. The official explanation was disorientation. The unofficial explanation didn't exist, because nobody wanted to ask. RT Sidewinder extracted at first light. The helicopter crew said the team was silent on the flight back, not the good silence of a successful mission, the silence of men in shock. The debrief lasted 4 hours. Kowalczyk submitted his report. Webb corroborated. Preacher, who had finally stopped shaking, provided what details he could. The Yards, who hadn't entered the tunnel, had nothing to add except confirmation that the Americans had come out of that hole looking like they'd seen combat, but there had been no gunfire, no engagement, no enemy. The report went up the chain, and then it vanished. Within 72 hours, RT Sidewinder was reassigned. Kowalczyk was rotated stateside, officially for medical evaluation. Webb was transferred to another FOB. Preacher completed his tour and never re-enlisted. The team was scattered. The tunnel coordinates were never passed to follow-on forces. No airstrike was called. No ground assault was launched. Someone, somewhere, decided that whatever was in that tunnel was better left alone. Now let me tell you about the photograph. In 1987, a Vietnamese-American veteran named Nguyen Van Duc, who had served as a tunnel rat with the 25th Infantry Division, was going through old footlockers in his garage in San Jose. He found a photograph he didn't remember taking. The image showed a tunnel wall, packed earth, and carved into that wall were symbols, angular patterns, geometric shapes. Duck had never been to the section of tunnel where RT Sidewinder had operated. He'd never heard of the mission. He'd never met Kowalczyk or Webb or Preacher. But when he looked at that photograph, he began to shake. His wife found him curled in the corner of the garage, crying. He couldn't explain why. He burned the photograph that night, and he never went into that garage again. Danny Kowalczyk died in 2004, heart attack. He was 59. His daughter said he never talked about the war, never talked about SOG, never talked about the tunnels. But in his final weeks, delirious from medication, he kept mentioning the breathing. He asked the nurses to check under the bed, to make sure nothing was down there, waiting. Marcus Webb is still alive as of the last public record. He lives in a rural part of Oregon. He doesn't give interviews. He doesn't attend reunions. When a documentary crew tried to contact him in 2015 for a project on MACV-SOG, he sent back a single-page letter. Some things that happened over there aren't meant to be recorded. Some doors, once you open them, don't close again. I'm not opening that door for you or anyone else. Let the dead rest. Let the darkness keep what it took. Timothy Preacher Ellers completed seminary after all. He was ordained in 1974. He spent 30 years as a minister in rural Kentucky. He never spoke publicly about his service, but according to his congregation, there was one thing he refused to do. He would never conduct a funeral in a below-ground mausoleum. He would never go underground again. I sat with this story for a long time before deciding to share it, because here's the thing, I don't know what was in that tunnel. Neither do you, neither did Kowalczyk, Webb, or Preacher, not really. They knew what they saw, they knew what they felt, but understanding it, making sense of it, that was beyond them. Some people will say it was stress, hallucination, the mind cracking under pressure in an environment designed to crack minds. And maybe that's true. The human brain does strange things in the dark, in confined spaces, in the presence of death. But that doesn't explain the carvings. That doesn't explain the French bodies sitting in perfect formation around a hole that went deeper into the earth than any tunnel should go. That doesn't explain why the Vietnamese military, after the war ended, sealed that section of the Co Chi complex and never reopened it. That doesn't explain why multiple veterans, decades apart, with no connection to each other, described the same sounds, the same smells, the same feeling of being watched by something that wasn't human, something that might never have been human. I want to leave you with something one of these veterans told me. He'd been a crew chief on the extraction bird that pulled RT Sidewinder out that morning. He watched them climb aboard, watched their faces, said he'd seen men come off hot Ellers with more color in their cheeks. He asked Kowalczyk what happened. Just a simple question. Crew chief to operator, brothers in arms. Kowalczyk looked at him, and this is what he said. You know how they tell us Charlie's got tunnels everywhere? How we're fighting an enemy that can disappear into the ground and pop up anywhere? The crew chief nodded. Charlie's not the only thing that lives underground over here. We've been fighting the wrong war this whole time. The real war, that's happening somewhere we can't go, somewhere we shouldn't go. Looked out at the jungle rushing past below, and I think we just knocked on a door that was supposed to stay closed. The helicopter lifted off into the morning haze. Beneath them, the hobo woods stretched to the horizon, green and silent and hiding secrets that had been old when the French arrived, old when the Vietnamese built their first temples there, old when the first humans wandered into those jungles thousands of years ago. Somewhere down there, in the dark, in the cool earth, something waited, something that had taken French soldiers, Arvon scouts, maybe others we never heard about, something that RT Sidewinder had been lucky enough to escape, or maybe. And this is the thought that kept Kowalczyk awake for the rest of his life. Maybe they hadn't escaped at all. Maybe they'd just been allowed to leave. And maybe, one day, whatever granted that mercy would decide it, wanted something in return. So here's my question for you, and I mean this sincerely. What do you think RT Sidewinder found in those tunnels? Mass psychosis triggered by carbon dioxide buildup in an enclosed space? A shared hallucination caused by underground gases, or something else? Something that doesn't fit neatly into our understanding of the world? Because I've learned something from years of collecting these stories. The men who were there, the ones who've carried these memories for half a century, they don't care what you or I believe. They know what they experienced. And they know the difference between fear and horror, between enemy action and something that can't be explained. These were MACV-SOG operators, the hardest men in the hardest war. They didn't break easy. Something in those tunnels broke them anyway. Drop your theories in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've got a story of your own, something that happened to you or someone you served with, reach out. These accounts matter. They deserve to be told, because the ones who were there won't be around forever, and when they're gone, the truth goes with them. Unless we listen now. Unless we remember. The Co Chi tunnels are a tourist attraction today. You can visit them. Walk through sanitized, widened passages designed for Western visitors, buy souvenirs, take pictures. But the section where RT Sidewinder descended? That's still sealed. And I don't think it's because of structural instability. I think it's because someone, on some level, knows that what's down there isn't meant for the light. Some doors are closed for a reason. And some questions are better left unanswered. But that never stopped any of us from asking, did it? Stay safe. Stay vigilant. And if you ever find yourself in a place that feels wrong, a place where the air goes cold and the silence gets too heavy and something in your gut tells you to run, listen to that voice. RT Sidewinder did. And they lived to tell the story. RT Sidewinder did, and they lived to tell the story.